Let me give you an example. When I was a kid, my father used to take me for walks in the woods. And one day, another kid comes up to me and says, "See that bird over there? That's a brown-throated thrush." And you know what? He was very proud of himself, very proud. He knew the name. His father had taught him the name. My father never taught me the names of birds. So this kid, he looks at me like I'm stupid, like my father doesn't know anything. But here's what my father taught me instead. He said, "You can know the name of that bird in every language in the world, in German, in Chinese, in Italian. You can know what every single person in every single country calls that bird. And when you're finished, you know absolutely nothing about the bird. Zero. All you know is something about people, what they call things." Now, what does the bird do? It sings. It teaches its young to fly. It migrates thousands of miles, and nobody knows how it finds its way. That's knowing something about the bird, but we don't do that. We learn the name, and we stop. We think we know something, but we don't. We're just carrying around labels. This happens everywhere, everywhere. You go to school, and they teach you energy makes things go. Okay, what does that mean? Well, the toy dog moves because it has energy. Fine. Where did the energy come from? You wound up the spring, and the spring has energy. Okay, but what is energy? It's the ability to do work. And what's work? Work is when you use energy. Do you see what just happened? We went in a circle. We used fancy words. We feel smart, but we haven't explained anything. We've just given it a name, and we think that's enough, but it's not. It's not even close. Here's the thing about reality. Reality doesn't care about the words you use. It doesn't care if you have a fancy degree, if you've read all the books, if you can quote all the theories. Reality just is. And if you don't understand it, if you really don't understand what's going on, you can't predict what's going to happen. You can't use it. You're helpless. I saw this at Los Alamos when we were working on the atomic bomb. We had all these safes, filing cabinets with combination locks, and people felt very secure. Oh, the documents are locked up. They're safe. But I looked at those locks, and I thought, these things are junk. So I learned to pick them. And you know what? I could open almost any safe in the place. The locks didn't matter, but people believed they mattered. They believed in the fantasy of security, not the reality. And when I would tell them, look, I can open your safe, they'd get angry. They didn't want to hear it, because it's more comfortable to believe in the fantasy that the lock protects you. The reality is those locks were worthless. But admitting that means you have to do something different, something harder. And people don't like that. This is what I mean by brutal logic. Reality is brutal. It doesn't bend to make you feel better. When we were testing the atomic bomb, when we were doing the calculations, nature didn't care if we wanted a certain result. Nature didn't care about our politics, our feelings, our hopes. We had to figure out what would actually happen, not what we wanted to happen. And you know what's funny? Some people, when they're trying to understand nature, they start with what they want to be true, and then they work backwards. They say, I believe this, so let me find a way to make it fit. That's not science. That's fantasy. That's religion maybe, but it's not science. In science, you have to do the opposite. You look at what actually happens, and you try to figure out why. You make a guess? Sure. You need imagination. You need to dream up possibilities. But then comes the hard part. You have to test it. You have to find out if you're right. And nature will tell you. Nature is the ultimate judge. Not your professor, not some committee, not some famous scientist. Nature. And if nature says you're wrong, you're wrong. Doesn't matter how beautiful your theory is. Doesn't matter how smart you are. Doesn't matter how much you want it to be true. You're wrong, and you have to admit it and start over. I'll give you another example. People come to me and they say, Dr. Feynman, I read this wonderful theory, and it explains consciousness, and it explains free will, and it explains the meaning of life. And I say, okay, that's great. What does it predict? What experiment can we do? And they look at me like I'm crazy. What do you mean experiment? This is philosophy. But if you can't test it, how do you know it's true? You're just making stuff up. You're creating a story that makes you feel good, but that's not reality. That's fantasy. And there's nothing wrong with fantasy, by the way. I like a good story, but don't confuse it with understanding the world. Let me tell you about the cargo cults. After World War II, there were these islands in the Pacific where the natives had seen airplanes land, bringing cargo, food, supplies, all sorts of wonderful things. And then the war ended, and the planes stopped coming. So what did the natives do? They built runways. They built control towers out of wood. They put on headphones made of coconuts. They waved signal flags. They did everything that looked like what they'd seen the soldiers do. But the planes didn't come. Why not? Because they were imitating the form. but they didn't understand the substance. They didn't understand radio or aviation or logistics. They just copied what they saw on the surface. And we do the same thing. We do it all the time in education, in business, in science even. We copy the form. We use the right words. We follow the procedures. We publish papers. We go to conferences. But do we understand? Do we really understand, or are we just wearing coconut headphones? Here's how you test it. This is really simple. If you understand something, truly understand it, you can explain it to a child. To someone who doesn't know any of the jargon, any of the technical terms, you can explain it in plain English, in simple terms. And if you can't do that, you don't understand it. You just know the words, you know the labels. I used to do this all the time. People would ask me to explain quantum electrodynamics, and I'd think, how would I explain this to a bartender? How would I explain it to my neighbor? And if I couldn't find a way, I knew I didn't really understand it myself. I was just shuffling equations around. Because here's the thing about reality. Reality is simple. Not easy, but simple. The fundamental principles are simple. They have to be. And if you really understand them, you can strip away all the fancy language and get to the core. The core is always simple. Now, nature is complicated. The details are complicated. You've got millions of atoms doing millions of things, and yeah, that's complicated. But the rules they follow, the basic laws, those are simple. E equals mc squared, F equals ma. Simple, beautiful, true, but we pile on complexity. We create jargon. We write papers full of equations that nobody can read. And sometimes that's necessary, but a lot of the time, it's just hiding. It's hiding our lack of understanding behind a wall of words. Let me tell you about a physics class I once taught. I asked the students, can you tell me, without using the word energy, what makes a toy car move when you wind it up? And they couldn't do it. They kept wanting to say energy because that's what they'd been taught, but they didn't know what it meant. They didn't understand the spring, the gears, the mechanics. They just had a word. So I made them take the toy apart. Look at it. See how it actually works. And suddenly it made sense. The spring gets twisted. It wants to untwist. When it untwists, it pushes on the gears. The gears turn the wheels. The wheels push on the ground. The car moves. No magic, no mysterious energy, just mechanics. Simple, understandable mechanics. That's reality. That's what I'm talking about. You have to look at the actual thing, not the label. You have to take it apart and see how it works. And this applies to everything, not just physics, everything. When someone tells you they have a plan to fix the economy, ask them, how does it actually work? What are the mechanisms? Can you explain it simply, or are you just using buzzwords? When someone tells you about a new diet, a new medicine, a new anything, ask, what's the evidence? Not stories, not testimonials, evidence. What actually happened when you tested this? Because reality doesn't care about your beliefs or your intentions. It only cares about what actually happens. And here's where it gets really brutal. You have to apply this to yourself. You have to be willing to be wrong. You have to be willing to admit when you don't understand something. And that's hard. That's really hard because we want to feel smart. We want to feel like we know things. But the greatest scientists, the greatest thinkers, they're the ones who can say, I don't know. They're the ones who can look at a problem and admit they're confused, because that's where learning starts. When you admit you don't know, that's when you can actually find out. I've worked with some of the smartest people in the world, Nobel Prize winners, brilliant mathematicians, incredible physicists. And you know what they all have in common? They're not afraid to say, I don't understand this. They're not afraid to look stupid. They're not protecting their ego. They're looking for the truth. And truth, real truth, is worth more than looking smart. It's worth more than being comfortable. It's worth more than protecting your beliefs. This is what I mean by brutal logic. Logic that doesn't bend. Logic that doesn't make exceptions for your feelings. Logic that follows where the evidence leads, even if you don't like where it's going. Take the Challenger disaster. The space shuttle exploded. 7 people died, and there was a commission to figure out what happened. And all these managers, these officials, they were making excuses. They were talking about how complex the system was, how many things could go wrong, how nobody could have predicted this. But I looked at the O-rings, simple rubber rings that seal the joints in the rocket boosters. And I found out that they get brittle in cold weather, and it was cold that morning. So I did a demonstration right there in the hearing. I took a piece of the O-ring material, put it in ice water, and showed everyone that when it gets cold, it loses its flexibility. It can't seal properly, simple, clear, brutal. The managers didn't want to hear it. It made them look bad. It showed they'd launched the shuttle when they knew, or should have known, it wasn't safe. But reality doesn't care about looking bad. The O-rings failed because they were cold. That's the truth. That's what happened. And once you see the truth, you can't unsee it. You can't go back to the fantasy. You can't pretend the O-rings were fine. You have to deal with reality. This is hard for people, really hard, because fantasy is comfortable. Fantasy lets you believe what you want to believe. Reality is uncomfortable. Reality tells you things you don't want to hear. But here's the beautiful part. Once you accept reality, once you stop fighting it, you can actually do something. You can make predictions. You can build things. You can solve problems because you're working with what is, not with what you wish was. When we built the atomic bomb, we had to get it right. We couldn't fool ourselves. If our calculations were wrong, the bomb wouldn't work. Or worse, it might kill us. So we checked everything. We tested everything. We argued. We debated. We challenged each other. Not because we were mean, but because we needed to know the truth. And when we tested it, when we set off that first bomb in the desert, nature told us if we were right, and we were. Not because we were geniuses, but because we were honest. We were honest about what we knew and what we didn't know. That's the key. Honesty. Intellectual honesty. Being willing to say, I was wrong. Being willing to change your mind when the evidence changes. Being willing to follow the logic wherever it goes. Most people aren't willing to do that. They pick a side and they stick with it. They defend it. They attack anyone who disagrees. But that's not thinking. That's just tribalism. That's fantasy. Reality is what's left when you stop believing in things. It's what remains when you strip away all the stories, all the wishes, all the hopes. It's what's actually there. And yes, it's brutal. It's brutal because it doesn't care about you. It doesn't care if you're a good person, if you're trying hard, if you believe really strongly. It just is. But it's also liberating because once you accept reality, you're free. You don't have to defend ideas that don't work. You don't have to pretend to understand things you don't. You can just look at the world honestly and try to figure it out. And figuring things out, really figuring them out, is the most exciting thing there is. It's better than any fantasy because it's real. It's true. And truth has a beauty that nothing else can match. When you understand something, when you really understand it, there's this moment of clarity. Everything clicks into place. You see how it works. You see why it has to be that way. And it's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. That's what I've spent my life doing. Trying to understand. Not to be smart. Not to impress anyone. But just to understand. To see how nature works. To strip away the mystery and see the mechanism. And the more I've done it, the more I've realized how much I don't know. The universe is vast and strange and wonderful, and we've barely scratched the surface. But here's what I do know. I know that the way forward is through honesty, through testing, through admitting when we're wrong and trying again, through looking at reality no matter how uncomfortable it is, because in the end, reality wins, always. You can believe whatever you want, but nature doesn't care. The universe doesn't care. Reality is going to do what it's going to do. So you have a choice. You can live in fantasy, comfortable and wrong, or you can face reality, uncomfortable and learning. I know which one I choose. I choose reality every time, even when it's hard, even when it tells me I'm wrong, even when it destroys my beautiful theories, because that's how you actually learn. That's how you actually understand. That's how you actually make progress. Not by memorizing names, not by learning formulas, not by believing what you're told, but by looking, by questioning, by testing, by being willing to be wrong. That's the brutal logic, and it's the only way to really know anything. So the next time someone tells you something, ask yourself, is this reality or is this fantasy? Can they explain it simply? Can they test it? Can they show you how it actually works? And if they can't, if all they have is words and wishes and stories, then you know you're looking at fantasy. And fantasy is fine for entertainment, but don't confuse it with truth. Don't confuse it with understanding, because the difference matters. It matters more than anything.